Hey Glass, on my way to Kansas City to get uncomfortable and explore how reality gets realized.
I know the book. Start from the pain. I just wanna. I know the book.
Generally have a $5 rule for lunch. I've had it since I was, like 18. First started going out on my own.
And a $29 salad. That's a good shot. Yes, please.
That's so.
Perfect. So I actually have no idea how to eat this. I'm here with Nathaniel Bozarth, class of 2012, ethnographer with Brainroot, and he's done some really cool projects with KCPT, including Your Fellow Americans and the Redream Project. And he actually interviewed the mayor on the street where he grew up, and that's where we're headed later today. So as uncomfortable as I am here, we're about to get more uncomfortable. Tanner Colby recently pointed out that in the 20th century, Kansas City produced two uniquely American geniuses who would forever alter the physical and cultural landscape of the country. One of these men built a magic kingdom, a fantasy world that offered non-stop, wholesome family fun and a complete escape from reality. The other one moved to Hollywood and opened a theme park. The last one is Walt Disney, of course. The first is J.C. Nichols, the creator of The Plaza, America's first car-friendly shopping mall, a wonderland of high-end shops and restaurants, surrounded by multi-million-dollar homes and a luxurious country club. Nichols was a pioneer who not only created an oasis for the wealthy, but also award-winning housing for the masses. GIs returning from World War II flocked to new homes in places like Prairie Village, just to the southwest of the plaza, which had just been awarded first place by the National Association of Home Builders as the best complete development in the United States. All this lies just to the west of the plaza. We are headed east. As we walk, we immediately notice something strange.
I don't know if this is crass or not, but currently white people count about 300, black people count 4.
We walk past a world-class art gallery with giant shuttlecocks on the lawn, a glass labyrinth, manicured lawns, beautiful gardens, public ponds. Even the sidewalks are artsy and decorative. But just 1 mile to the east, everything changes.
Everything you just saw, a beautiful lake, the kids fishing, that's like 2 blocks that way. And now we're crossing over to Troost, and you can see behind me there's bars on the windows, and this is just the beginnings. Often called the Troost Wall because there's a major dividing line here. It divides rich, poor, black, white, and we're gonna go explore the area and see how different it is.
It's pretty ironic. We have a dead tree right behind the Truth sign.
Signs of poverty are everywhere. The plan was to find a place to eat, so we stopped by this place that sold donuts and hamburgers. We pay through glass, and our donuts come out in a steel drawer. There's no place to sit down inside.
So when white people move out and sort of hollow out the urban core, there are now fewer jobs for the black people that are still in Kansas City.
There are no manicured lawns, public gardens, or fancy sidewalks. So here is Troost Avenue. To the west, mostly white. To the east, mostly black. More than a racial divide, Troost is also a dividing line of wealth, income, education, and opportunity. The moment we cross the line, we go from mostly white and college-educated, with household incomes of nearly $80,000 and housing values at $182,000. Across the street, incomes are less than half that, and housing values plummet to just $23,000. A few blocks later, incomes drop by half again, to less than $15,000. Why? How did this happen? J.C. Nichols? No. There will be no clear villain in this story. This is about all of us. It is a story about the social construction of reality, a story about how our beliefs shape our behaviors, which shape our institutions, and how our institutions shape our behaviors, which shape our beliefs. It is a story about how we, all of us, built a wall that you cannot see or touch, and how we continue to support that wall. 200,000 years ago, there's nobody here. we were all in Africa, and we all had black skin. 20,000 years ago, still nobody here. But modern humans had spread throughout Africa, Asia, and Europe. And where there was less sun, humans evolved lighter skin to absorb more vitamin D. 2,000 years ago, it was the western edge of the vast Hopewell Indian Nation. And nearly 200 years ago, a slave plantation. By 100 years ago, the plantation had been sold off as parcels, and the area around Troost had become a prosperous area, home to Millionaire's Row and the richest man in Kansas City. It was the place to be for parades and good shopping, a bustling hub of a growing metropolis. The National Housing Act of 1934 set off a housing boom by ensuring low-cost, low-term mortgages.
Construction of new homes was beginning to increase at such a rate that the economists and financiers had to rub their eyes to be sure they could believe what they were seeing.
The entire face of the nation is being changed for the better, even to the extent of creating totally new towns. It's a familiar sight today to see such communities erected on what once were just wide open spaces. And all of this has been accomplished by the initiative of independent home builders who had the courage to venture into such projects. Now there are shopping centers, well-paved streets, parks, play areas, and sports facilities.
It was the birth of suburbia. But blacks were locked out of that boom. The deeds to J.C. Nichols properties in places like Prairie Village had racially restrictive covenants on them, which said that they could not be used, owned, nor occupied by Negroes. But it wasn't just J.C. Nichols. 96% of all properties in Johnson County had these restrictions on them. Meanwhile, the Federal Housing Administration created a system to determine who could receive these low-cost loans. New developments on the outskirts of cities were considered safe and given the color green. Inner cities were considered risky investments and given the color red. They were redlined. As banks lent money to green areas but not to red areas, the red areas fell into disrepair and decline. Racially restrictive covenants were outlawed in 1948, and redlining was outlawed by the Civil Rights Act of 1968. They created the equal housing opportunity. This is what Martin Luther King fought so hard for. So now we have places like this, and there have been a lot of movements to try to improve housing in the inner city, and this is just one example. But segregation continued through practices like blockbusting. When a black family moved into a neighborhood, realtors would frighten white homeowners with the prospect of declining property values. Even if the homeowner was not racist, they might worry that others would sell, thereby driving prices down. So they all sell, driving prices down. Black families soon found their houses worth far less than what they had paid for them. In the early 1950s, the area around 31st and Troost was still home to the rich. Their kids went to Central High. Central was segregated until Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. The school desegregated the following year, but by 1962, just 8 years later, it had resegregated and was now entirely black. And so was the neighborhood. Troost marked the edge of the school district, and as white flight happened over the next 20 years, Troost became a dividing line between white and black, rich and poor.
In 1984, there was a big court case that ultimately desegregated the schools and started the Magnet program, which is now the Signature program. But during that court case, they actually took the jury to tour these buildings. And these guys, they described these guys as being like real tough cowboys, some of them like professionals. They toured these buildings and they all came out with tears in their eyes. They just couldn't believe that this was the place where we'd be educating our children. That's how bad the schools were.
The area east of Troost entered the downward spiral that happens when 80% of the population leaves. Property values declined. Taxes went up to cover a need for more services, but services could not keep up, and eventually the area hit rock bottom. It became a dumping ground for those things that people in places like Mission Hills would never allow in their neighborhood, like large and loud highways.
There's no political capital or political will to keep these things from coming into your neighborhood. So when the US 71 went in, 10,000 people were relocated. All these people lost their homes so that this could be built to service the people who are moving out to the suburbs.
9 out of 10 Americans today say they are not racist, yet we live divided. There are no clear villains in this story. Even J.C. Nichols can say he was simply acting in the best interest of his clients. He was just protecting property values. It isn't his fault that property values went down when black families moved into a neighborhood, and it certainly wasn't the fault of the blacks moving in. Banks who refuse to lend money east of Troost can point to the very real risk involved in lending to any low-income neighborhood with low property values. We are faced with the strange situation of racism without racist. The racism is built into the structure of our world itself. Structural racism is the cumulative effect of policies, systems, and processes that may not have been designed with racism in mind, but which have the effect of disadvantaging certain racial groups. Today, nationwide, the average white family has 16 times the wealth of the average black family.
And there is no one factor more representative of or more conducive to the economic well-being of the American citizen than the home in which he lives.
Black families, locked out of the suburban housing boom, were unable to build wealth by paying rent or obtain loans to keep up their homes.
The realization of the American dream, the envy of the entire world.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto Mission Road.
It's clean, it's neat, it doesn't look dilapidated, it looks cared for, it looks safe, it's quiet.
And those are the kinds of things that actually end up getting worn on people's skin. It's like, this is white space, and what we just came out of is this black space. That sense of insecurity, criminality, immorality, and so on starts to get attached to blackness in the same way that this sense of neighborhood friendliness, home, and proper citizenship, cleanliness, all these things get associated with whiteness. And it really matters. We end up wearing these judgments on our skin.
Kind of made me feel emotional that last couple blocks.
Yeah.
Like, to me, the American dream is a tradition that carries so many shackles because it allows me as a white person growing up in the suburbs to believe, hey, you know what, like, I'm going to work hard all my life and my hard work is going to pay off and I'm going to get this idea of the American dream, you know, a house, 2 cars, 2.78 kids and a dog. But really, like, that idea of the American dream assumes that hard work pays off equally for everyone, and it doesn't. It just doesn't.